Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 24th of August, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, unfortunately, the latest Geth release, version 1.10.22 that I talked about the other day, had a bug in it that essentially, I think, corrupted the entire database, which is obviously not good, and obviously not good considering it was the mainnet merge release. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the merge as far as I can tell in terms of the code that led to this bug. It had to do with a different kind of feature set that was being merged into Geth, but I mean, there were some kind of concerns around this, and understandably so. People were kind of saying that why are these bugs or these new features being kind of introduced before the merge? Like, shouldn't we wait till after the merge to merge these things into the code base? And I would agree with that. I think that this was weird on Go Ethereum's behalf here. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, and hopefully the fix that they've brought out today, version 1.10.23, is able to kind of rectify the issues here. But yeah, I mean, I do want to acknowledge that it's kind of like poor poor thinking to kind of release that this close to the merge. Now, the reason why I guess this is kind of like even worse is because the client diversity on the execution layer is really poor right now. I mean, if I bring up the client diversity website, I can show you what I mean by this. Basically, the consensus layer is doing great. I mean, you can see here that Prism and is down to 38% from its supermajority a few months ago, and Lighthouse is 33%, and then you've got the rest of them here. But on the execution layer side of things, it's still predominantly Geth by a large margin. I mean, Geth is 78% of the network, and Aragon is second at only 11.6%, Besu at 5.3%, and Nethermind at 4.4%. This has been getting better over time. I think a few months ago, Geth was close to 90%. So it has been getting better, but it is still not ideal. Obviously, we want people to be using clients other than Geth, but Geth is the most battle-tested, kind of like hardened and secure execution client that we have. In saying that, I have personally been running Nethermind lately, and I've had no issues with it. I have my staking box running Nethermind. I have a Nethermind node on one of my other boxes, and I've run Aragon and Besu before and had no issues with those either. So I think the risk at this point in time of running Geth going into the merge could potentially be greater than running one of the minority clients, simply because if there is a bug with Geth, it's the same as if there was a bug on a majority consensus client, where you would stand to potentially lose or get slashed as a solo validator because of this. Now, in saying that, I understand why people want to stay on Geth until post-merge, until things have just kind of settled down and more streamlined and more secure and stable, and then change to another execution layer client, which is totally fair. But personally, I've gotten off Geth for multiple reasons. I want to obviously contribute to client diversity. I want to make sure that I'm protecting myself, and we need to get Geth down to. I mean, it's the same as on the consensus layer side. We want to get Geth down to under 67% at least, which isn't actually a far kind of, or I guess like a big ask from here. Ideally, we want Geth to be much less than 67%, but still, it's not that big of an ask. It's not like Geth is at 90+% at the moment, which is awesome. But we're going to have to wait, I think, till after the merge for the kind of share of the network to come down a lot. Now, it was kind of like some jokes being made in the Discord channel, and just generally that I saw that this was done on purpose by the Geth team. This bug was introduced on purpose in order to scare people into going to one of these minority clients. I mean, I think that's just a joke. I don't think that actually happened, but it is a good reminder. Like, there is some truth to that. There is a very good reminder here that you should be using a minority client if possible, and if you're happy to take maybe a little bit extra risk in that they're not as battle hardened and battle tested as Geth, but at the same time, I think it levels itself out because you're not at risk of there being a majority client bug and being kind of, I guess, slashed here. So that, I guess, like offsets those other risks, at least in my mind. So that's why people are concerned about it. Now, if you want more details on what the bug actually was, I think Peter from the Geth team has been putting out tweets about this on his Twitter profile, which I haven't got handy right now. But you can go look about all the details on that, and also look at it on GitHub, I believe. But if you were running Geth, this hotfix version If you haven't upgraded yet, just skip 0.22 and go straight to 0.23, and all should be well with your node there. But as I've said plenty of times, if you are running Geth, consider switching to another client such as Aragon, Besu, or Nethermind. As I said, I've had so far the most experience with Nethermind outside of Geth, and I've had no issues. It seems to be going quite well. Very easy to set up. So if you are a solo staking looking for another execution layer client to use at this point in time, just from personal experience, I would recommend Nethermind, but you can choose from Aragon, Besu, and there are others out there, but I think, if you want to play it on the safe side, going with the majority, I guess, or going with the more well-known ones is probably the better bet here. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. As I said, upgrade it to 0.23 if you haven't yet. All right, so speaking of execution, consensus layer, clients, staking, all that good stuff, Summer Esat here finally has his merge-ready mainnet guides for Lighthouse, Nimbus, Prism, and Teku ready now. So for those of you who know who Summer is, he's been doing staking guides for quite a while now, and not just for mainnet, but also for testnets. They're amazingly detailed guides. Like, it's actually incredible how much detail he puts into these. And you can see here that this is a guide for Ubuntu/Lighthouse, and it's linked here, and it's a 45-minute read, which means it is a very, very in-depth guide. This goes through everything you're probably going to need to know about running running Lighthouse, I guess, in this guide on Ubuntu, and also how to get it all set up with command line, everything like that on Ubuntu here. So I mean, there are guides for not just Lighthouse. There is Nimbus, Prism, and Teku here, and I believe they're all very similar, in terms of like reading, and all very similar setups, but just using different clients. So I guess a very big shout out to Summer here for putting these together. I know this kind of work is definitely not an easy job to do, definitely very time consuming, and this isn't even his full-time job. He works at Blizzard, actually, Activision Blizzard, on Overwatch as a senior engineering manager. So he does this in his spare time, which is crazy to me. So if you are looking for a guide on how to get started with solo staking, I couldn't recommend his guides enough. Like, this is basically what you need when it comes to guides for staking. And I know there are other people out there who are doing solo staking, but maybe you're using kind of like DApp node, which is fine as well. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to do it all on your own because it's just something that you want to do, then definitely follow Summer's guides here. They're probably the best that I've come across personally. All right, so speaking of staking, Superfizz started off a little trend on Twitter yesterday, which got me super excited. There's a hashtag called Stake from Home that basically has pictures of people's staking setups, and Superfizz was tweeting a lot about it. He was retweeting them and tweeting them from DMs that he got. But essentially, this is basically pictures of people's various staking setups. So you can see that there's Nux here, little devices, there are Raspberry Pis, there is whole server racks, there is so many different setups. I mean, I can scroll through them all here. This one's pretty interesting. On the right-hand side is actually a mining setup with a bunch of miners in there being vented outside. And on the left-hand side, you can see the NUC there, which is a staking with the same amount of value as the kind of mining setup has, which is insane when you really think about it. Like, that little NUC replaces that entire setup. And it reminds me of those old comparisons people do between computers 30 years ago and computers today. Like, a smartphone, the computing power on a smartphone 30 years ago would have been this massive mainframe thing. Now it fits in the palm of your hand. So that's how I view this. Obviously, it's not an exact analogy, but it's kind of funny when you look at it and you see that it's in a similar vein, where you have like a tiny little NUC having the same value in terms of ETH stake versus this big mining setup and the value in terms of mining hardware. So I thought that was a cool little setup. But yeah, I mean, this server rack's really cool here from Lamboshi, who some of you will know from the ETHstaker community. Very active Ethereum. But yeah, if you just want to scroll through this, you can on your own. You can see all the different setups. You can see mine here, which is the staking box that I used to have behind me that you guys will be familiar with. Original Daily Gwei viewers, or I guess like long-time Daily Gwei Refuel viewers will know all about this setup. And that's still the same box that I'm using. It is not a high-powered box. It may look more involved than a NUC, but the specs aren't that high. I think in terms of CPU, it's just got an i5 in it. RAM, I believe, is 32 gig, I believe. I can't remember exactly what the specs are off the top of my head right now. And as you can see, the motherboard is Mini ITX. It's a very basic motherboard. And I've got some cooling in there. Obviously, you want to keep it all cool. But other than that, it's not super beefy. Like, it really is just a standard setup. And I run multiple validators on it with it's an execution layer client and everything like that. So you don't have to have beefy hardware to stake, which I just think is absolutely awesome. Of course. But yeah, you can just keep going through. I'm actually surprised by the amount of NUCs that people are running, which NUCs are these kind of small little bare bones PCs that you can add your own stuff to and stake on. And people are using Raspberry Pis as well and have all types of different setups here, which is awesome to see. You can see this is a Raspberry Pi, which is a Rocket Pool node, which is awesome as well. So if you want to check this out, you can. I just wanted to highlight it for you guys because at the end of the day, Ethereum staking has been made to favor solo stakers as long as you have that 32 ETH. That is the biggest barrier to entry. If you have that 32 ETH, which is a big barrier to entry, don't get me wrong. It didn't used to be as big when the ETH price was lower, but these days it's a huge barrier to entry. I mean, it's 60 grand at current prices, 60 grand US. But if you get over that barrier, and I mean, you can still do this with Rocket Pool. You can run Rocket Pool nodes with less than 32, but I'm talking as a fully self-sovereign validator. The hardware requirements are very minimal, and that was done purposefully because it basically shifts the requirements from having expensive hardware to having, I guess, like an expensive stake. And that means that you can stake from any kind of device you want to. And then it also means that we can have decentralized pool solutions like Rocket Pool where you can stake with even less capital required, but still be able to run nodes and all that good stuff there. So definitely just think this speaks to the Ethereum culture of decentralization, and having all these people post their setups is really heartwarming. I just loved seeing it personally. All right, so speaking of Rocket Pool, this has been a discussion in the community for quite a while about how Rocket Pool will be treating MEV-Boost post-merge. You can see here, the merge will enable Rocket Pool mini pool operators to generate additional returns by capturing MEV. Flashbot's MEV-Boost will be disabled by default, but node operators can use it if they wish. Relay choice will also be possible once multiple relay options become available. I think there's only one relay option still, it's the Flashbot's relay, but Blocks Route and Manifold are both working on relays. I don't know if they're going to be ready in time for the merge. I think one of them may be, but we can expect a lot more relays to come post-merge. And if you are a mini pool operator, you'll be able to use these other relays because, as I've explained before, Flashbots as a relayer is going to be censoring though by default. They're not going to be including transactions to Tornado Cash, whereas other relays are not going to be censoring by default. They may have an option in there, and then some of them I think won't even offer that option at all. So when it comes to, I guess, solo staking or being a mini pool operator, you definitely want to choose the MEV-Boost relayer that closely aligns with your own views. Obviously, I will be choosing the one that that does not censor, but at the end of the day, I don't think we should blame anyone for choosing the censoring one, especially if they're in the US where these sanctions actually apply to them. And I've talked about censorship resistance on Ethereum, so much lately. I'm not going to rehash all my arguments again because people were telling me off in the Discord channel before for being a bit too preachy. I know I can be like that, but it's kind of hard not to when you're doing this when I'm doing this kind of every day, and it's very hard not to repeat myself. But I'm not going to repeat myself there. I just wanted to put it on your radar that Rocket Pool is committed to this, which is very cool to see. And if you are a mini pool operator, you will be able to choose your own relayer, probably post-merge at this stage. All right, so Connext is out with an update today. So they said earlier this year, we announced the Amarok network upgrade to overcome limitations in Connext V1. It introduces support for arbitrary message passing, enabling developers to integrate easily into our network to build fully expressive cross-chain applications. The upgrade modularizes the bridging stack. Instead of one system powering all the functionalities, developers instead call into a single function that splits actions between a liquidity layer, which is Connext, and a messaging layer. After intensive research into the trade-offs of bridge security models, we chose to partner closely with Nomad. The team then invented the optimistic bridge model, a messaging system that relays data across chains using fraud proofs similar to optimistic rollups. And that was the bridge that actually, I believe, got hacked the other day. Yeah, it was. There was a Nomad bridge there, but Connext is still working with them, and they still believe that Nomad is one of the strongest and one of the best teams in the bridge space, but it will take time for Nomad to recover funds and restart its system, and the Connext team obviously cannot afford to wait for this to happen, as they have 150 routers, over a dozen dApp teams, and tens of thousands of users waiting for the Amarok upgrade to go live. And they say here, fortunately, we were able to come up with an alternative approach that only modestly extends our timeline. Pending audits, Amarok will temporarily utilize existing AMBs for rollups and sidechains to relay messages and a series of connectors to plug into those. So if you're wondering what happened to the Amarok upgrade, this is why it hasn't gone live yet, or at least one of the reasons, probably the major reason why it hasn't gone live yet, that Nomad hack. But seems Connext has navigated around this and is going to be putting this upgrade live sooner rather than later, and it's designed to be a temporary temporary solution, obviously, there. Now, bridges haven't been a topic of discussion lately as much, I think, obviously, because it's been overshadowed by the OFAC and censorship stuff generally. But building secure, decentralized, censorship-resistant bridges is still a very difficult task. And I've seen people shame bridges for being hacked, and I don't think that's the right approach here. Obviously, I've gone on about it on the Refuel a lot, how a lot of these bridges are inherently insecure. A lot of them increase a lot of extra risk if you're depending on where you're bridging to, and even the, I guess, layer 2 bridges, even the native ones, have their own risks associated with them. Like, for example, they're centralized. Like, that is a huge risk. So when looking at bridges just generally, I think instead of attacking the bridge and making fun of the bridge and everything like that, it's probably better to focus on which bridges are kind of taking security as seriously as possible, not laughing at people that suggest bugs or suggest edits to the bridge. There have been teams that have done this in the past, which has kind of annoyed me because there's a lot of value locked in these things. And also just realizing that no matter what you do on Ethereum or any chain out there, there is always a possibility of bugs. Even on Bitcoin, like the Bitcoin code base, yes, has been tested, battle hard, and there's a huge bug bounty on it to exploit it. But it doesn't mean bugs can't exist or can't be introduced either. So you always have to be vigilant of that sort of stuff, and you always have to realize that your risk goes up exponentially as soon as you interact with certain contracts. And it can go up even just a lot interacting with the trusted contracts. And it's not just risk of hack, but it's also economic risk. For example, this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. If you're becoming a Uniswap liquidity provider, just as an example, when you do that, you have to account for not only the fact that there could be a bug in there, that should be part of your risk profile, but you should also account for the fact that you're taking on the risk of impermanent loss. Now, impermanent loss is probably the worst term that this industry has ever invented, because a lot of the time it's not impermanent. But what I mean is that you should be aware of the fact that you may not, and a lot of the times, get out what you put in. The fact of the matter is, if you LP on an ETH USDC LP, for example, and the fee revenue doesn't make up for the movement in price, you may have just been better off holding ETH in that scenario. Obviously, with Uniswap v3, it becomes more complex, where you can move your liquidity around, and it becomes a more of an optimized game there. But there is always economic risks here, and even putting money into lending markets. If you put a piece of collateral into a lending market, and then the borrow rate is at 100% of that collateral, it means that there's none of that collateral left in the protocol, and it means you have to wait to withdraw your collateral. So for example, just as an easy example, if you put ETH into a money market and 100% of that ETH has been borrowed from the money market, and there's no ETH in there, then you wouldn't be able to withdraw your ETH even if you paid down your debt. There are different ways around this with, I guess, withdrawing different assets and stuff like that, but it all introduces more risk. So you need to be aware of those risks when interacting with things, not just smart contract risk, but economical risk as well. Because I see plenty of people, especially on Twitter, they're so confused why they've provided liquidity on Uniswap or provided liquidity on another AMM, and they've actually ended up with less ETH than they put in. It's like, well, because the fact is the market moved against you. It's as simple as that. Like, just because it's automated doesn't mean it doesn't still suffer from the same perils of just general market making. Market making is not a free lunch. It's definitely very specialized, especially when it comes to V3 and moving your position around and concentrating your liquidity. So it's good to be aware of that. But maybe I got a little bit off track there, but I think bridges fall into the same kind of vein here, but also I think you have to be pragmatic too, and I'm glad Connext is being pragmatic instead of just waiting for the Nomad kind of hole to be filled and the Nomad team to rectify everything. They're marching ahead with the upgrade that they want to put live, which I think is the correct thing to do. But I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can read their full thread, and I believe there's a blog post attached to it as well. All right, so Optimism has a thread out today where they said, earlier this year, we declared a summer of optimism. We launched the Optimism Collective, the OP token, and distributed grants to projects on Optimism to grow the ecosystem. Here's an update on OP Summer. So you can see here some stats. So since 12 of 43 Season 1 incentive programs launched, Optimism is averaging 150,000 transactions a day, up 43%. Versus the prior 90 days. Over $725 million has been bridged from L1 to Optimism, and TVL crossed the $1 billion mark. In total, 25.4 million OP has been allocated as grants across these 12 projects. Now, if we take the current price of OP, I believe that would be about $30-ish million or a bit more than that, which I guess compared to the market cap of OP is not that high, so this has actually been quite a sustainable rewards program in terms of dollar amounts. But it just depends. Like obviously, dollar amounts are going to fluctuate. But the remaining 31 projects, approved projects, have yet to launch their season 1 incentives. So expect more explosive growth, as they're saying here as well. And there's also an OP Summer Grants dashboard to keep track of everything. It's on Notion, so you can see here, you can keep track of which projects are going to have which incentives. Are they live? Have they already been done? How much is being allocated? All that good stuff. I mean, if I click into Lyra here, I can see all the details just listed here. When it's starting, when it's ending, all that good stuff, which is very awesome. And there's a bunch of other things in this thread as well from Optimism. But great to see these layer 2s growing. As I explained the other day, no point taking just layer 1 metrics anymore and drawing conclusions from that. You also need to look at layer 2s, especially layer 2s that have these incentive programs. You have to look at them from a different lens and kind of be like, okay, well, if these incentive programs don't exist anymore, will the usage stay the same? Will it go down? How much will it go down by? Will it grow? You know, we don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. We can be relatively certain that the usage will be higher with incentives than without. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But still, there are kind of like protocols that don't have any incentives that have kept growing. So it's always good to take the nuanced approach there. All right, so Tom Emmer, who is a congressman for Minnesota's 6th district here, has sent a letter to Treasury Secretary Yellen regarding the unprecedented sanctioning of Tornado Cash. The growing adoption, he says here, the growing adoption of decentralized technology will certainly raise new challenges for OFAC. Nonetheless, technology is neutral and the expectation of privacy is normal. Now, this is a long letter. I'm not going to read it out on the refuel, but basically, he has asked a bunch of different questions about this and why this is done, you know, what's going on here, why OFAC sanctions a set of smart contracts when they've in the past only sanctioned individuals and corporations or companies and similar entities. I think this is amazing because, as I've said, we can't just fight against these sanctions with the technology that we have in crypto. We need to fight and meet these people where they are, which is meat space, so to speak, which is the political arena. Because at the end of the day, if we can do both, if we can build better technology, but also get these regulators to not regulate us harshly, or at least push them towards a better direction, it is a massive win. Now, I know I may sound optimistic towards these regulators seeing eye to eye with us, or at least, you know, being less restrictive. I'm not that optimistic. I'm not like pessimistic to the point where I don't think it can happen, but I also know that governments, especially governments like the US, they're very strict about certain things. And when it comes to the sanctions that they put on other countries, they're very strict about that. There is, especially places like North Korea, like there is not, like, they do that on purpose because they want people to know that they're serious about it. And when fighting back against these sorts of things, it's very hard. OFAC actually has a lot of powers, and it's basically viewed as an organization that they don't have free reign, but it's basically one that is viewed as something that is very important for the US national security. Now, when you start venturing into that arena, it becomes very messy, I think. But still, Tom, being a congressman, is doing his job of putting forward these questions to OFAC and getting them to clarify their position on things and getting them to put more information out there so that we all can just become more educated on this. Because all they did was do the sanctioning. They put out a little bit of information around it, but as far as I know, there hasn't really been anything else besides the arrest of the Tornado Cash dev, which is obviously poor, but that's not on the US's behalf, that is on the Netherlands' behalf. But still, we need more information to go on. We can't just rely on the little information that we've gotten, because it does affect real people. It affects real companies. It affects the whole ecosystem. I mean, we've seen what happened over the last few weeks because of this. So we need answers, and I'm glad that Tom is on our side here, at least trying to get answers from OFAC. And at the end of the day, we can ask these questions to them, but they're not going to respond to us directly. They're going to want these representatives to ask the questions, and then they'll may or may not respond to those questions from the representatives. But you can give this full letter a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you. All right, so just a quick shout out here. I put out a tweet where I said, appreciation post for antiprosynthesis. Without his relentless retweeting, I wouldn't be able to keep up with even half of what's happening in Ethereum. Go follow him if you haven't yet. And I highly recommend giving him a follow. I think I've shouted him out on the refuel before, but seriously, guys, If I've been away from my computer or if I haven't had time to keep up with what's happened during the day, I go to his profile and I find all the stuff that I've missed. And a lot of the time, Twitter won't even show me what I've missed. It's Twitter's algorithm is so trash for me. I don't know why. It's just so bad. It misses so many important things. But I go to his profile and I'm able to find so much of it. So if you want even more Ethereum knowledge than I give you on the Refuel and that you get from other places like maybe Bankless and Twitter itself, follow antiprosynthesis. He retweets so much stuff. Obviously, because he retweets so much, maybe not all of it is relevant to you. There are some trading stuff retweeted in there, but I don't think that matters. I think the fact that he retweets so much and it means that I can't miss anything, I think that's a really great thing and great value add to the community that he does. And to be honest, he does all of it for pretty much free. There was a Gitcoin grant that he had that got a bunch of money donated to, but that was quite a long time ago now. And since then, his Gitcoin grant hasn't actually attracted that much donations, which is sad, but he still does this. He does this because he loves Ethereum, and he does this as a public good, which I think we need more of. There's not many of the people that will do this. I don't know anyone else that does as much kind of relentless retweeting as antiprosynthesis does, not even close. So I just wanted to quickly give a shout out to him and thank him for all his tireless work over the years, because at the end of the day, we need more people like that, as I mentioned. They can't just be me. I've said that plenty of times. It has to be all of you. And I know that a lot of you in the community, especially in the Discord channel, you guys put out a lot of information. It doesn't have to be on Twitter. It's in the Discord channel as well. There's a lot of great conversations happening. I woke up again today and there was 400 unread messages, and I'm just like, you know what? It's probably really important, but I just do not have the time to go through 400 messages. And I skimmed through it, and there was a lot of great conversations happening there. And I love seeing that happen. I love not even being involved in it. I love you guys just talking amongst yourselves, because as I've said plenty of times before, you shouldn't just listen to me. You shouldn't just take my opinions at face value. And I don't think the Daily Gwei community is a bunch of yes men or anything like that. I think you guys challenge me on a lot of things, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I really enjoy watching those conversations happen within the Discord channel on that one there. But yeah, I think this episode is going to end a little bit earlier today because I don't have anything else to talk about right now. I mean, I do, but I don't want to kind of like go into and repeat myself again. So I'm just going to end it there for today. Maybe I'll do a longer episode tomorrow. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.